the man in the arena. What's up, Jim? Welcome to Dad Edge, my friend.
Hey, man, it's great to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Hey, dude, it's great to have you on. It's no secret. A lot of people who have been following the podcast for a amount of time probably knew that I didn't have maybe the best relationship with God. Not to say that it was bad. It was just probably rusty, right?
Yep.
Like he was kind of called on him when I needed something. Didn't really have the relationship that I truly wanted. But I know, you are a man of faith, as people heard in the intro. And everything you do is founded on that foundation. And where I really want to start is you're very passionate about masculinity, being a man of faith, being an on-point husband, father, grandfather as well.
Yep.
But where did this all start from you as far as your childhood? What was it like growing up for you?
You know what? It's interesting. I was born and raised in a family that attended church, but it was sit down, stand up, kneel. It was so boring. I remember literally carving my name into the pews. It was so boring.
Oh, so you vandalized too on top of it.
Yeah, I vandalized my local parish. And
nice.
So and I remember my mom just begging Mom on Sundays, please let us go after communion. Please let's go after communion. So I hated church just because it was boring. I mean, I went through catechism, went through the whole 9 yards, but on my 13th birthday, my parents got divorced. So that was a huge
on your birthday.
Well, that's how I remember it. Maybe you got a pellet gun, maybe another kid got a baseball glove. My parents gave us it's not your fault, children, that we're getting a divorce speech.
Wow.
So yeah, it was right on my birthday. It was within a day of my birthday, but I mean, I remember it as my birthday. I can't remember the exact day, but it was right there. And so that was the day my mom said, hey, we don't have to go to church again. I was doing that for your dad. It was kind of his parents. And so we stopped going. And then I had a guy who was my basketball coach when I was a freshman. Yeah, I played basketball. I wasn't very good, but he was my basketball coach, and he was also a campus life director, which it's a high school ministry. And by the time I was a senior, he was one of my football coaches at that high school right there, Morro Bay High School, California. And he kind of trapped me into a small group because he said, hey, I want to help you guys win football games. I said, well, I'm all about winning football games because I worshiped football. I mean, it was all about football. Most guys have pictures of, good looking girls in the locker rooms. I had pictures of linebackers taped on my locker room. Yeah. Serious.
Just hopefully they weren't in bikinis or anything.
Nope. And thongs weren't invented. Thank you, Jesus. So, yeah. So, this small group was actually him preaching to us. And here's these guys that didn't know anything about God or care. And we're just sitting there glossy eyed. And fast forward, by the end of my senior year, this guy and I have become great friends. And he actually introduced me to a life-changing relationship with Jesus Christ. And he's my vice president today of our organization, Men in the Arena. So to this day, we are still very close. But that was the day I began this journey of realizing I couldn't become everything that God had created me to be without him in my life. And so that's why I'm so passionate about the spiritual side of manhood.
Dude, I love where this is going already, and we're not even 4 minutes in. So I want to back up for a second.
Yeah.
Did you see your dad much after the divorce?
Oh, I've got a phenomenal dad. Now, what led up to the divorce was not phenomenal on my dad's part, but my dad was a high school teacher at the school I attended. And so he was incredibly engaged in the lives of his kids. I mean, more engaged than a lot of men who are actually living in the home with their kids. I have a great dad. We talk on the phone about every other day to this day. He is the most engaged parent I've ever met. He's just super engaged. And so, he's turning 80 in May, and we're going to take him on an axis deer hunt on the island of Lanai and try to help him out and get his last buck. He's kind of like, he can't move that well anymore, but yeah, very close, very good father. None my issues that are daddy issues have nothing to do with a dad who's not engaged.
That's cool, man. And you said you had siblings.
Yeah, I had a little brother and a little sister. And my little brother, when he graduated high school, he was 125 pounds. When I graduated, I was 225. And so I was always protecting my little brother and sister. So I became this guy by default who protected the innocents. I've always hated bullies. I've despised bullies. I think they're cowards. And so I've always protected the weak and the powerless. And I've That's just been me. I'm this big, strong guy, but I just am all about, man, hey, we need to take care of those people who really can't take care of themselves. So, yeah.
So you're a sheepdog.
I am a sheepdog. I am definitely not a sheeple. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
That's not bad.
A sheepdog. No, I agree. And I know you're a sheepdog too. So woof.
What, dude, listen, you're speaking my language here.
Yeah.
I was raised bullied. So I was overweight a lot of my life. And so I was, fat ass, lard ass, fatso, all these things, you're lard ass, whatever, I got it constantly. And so, what I find is that if my kids get bullied, man, I mean, everybody always talks about like there's a mama bear, right, in every family. Well, dude, I am like Papa Bear. Like the claws and the teeth come out, mess with my kid, and like I don't know, man. It's just I can't. I'm the same as you. I can't stand when people are constantly bullying who they view as the weaker person, right? Which in actuality, it's the person who's bullying. Look in the mirror. That's the
absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? But what about so? Let's go back to you being 13 years old. You just found out your parents are getting divorced. Like, listen, that's a pivotal age in a young man's life, right? 11 to 17, 18 years old. These are milestone, age ranges right here. But you being 13, you're going through puberty, you're becoming a young man. This is the time in your life where, to be quite honest, like having that father figure, or maybe even having like just the family unit all under one roof, probably feels like a super important thing. But and for you at this age, this was going in the opposite direction. What's going through your mind?
Yeah, all I can think of, Larry, is it was absolutely devastating. I mean, my dad instantly had a girlfriend who he ended up marrying. He's been married to her for 45 years. My mom started bringing these strange guys around on dates. And I was kind of the head of the household now. I was kind of the guy who was, giving these boyfriends the evil stare down. What's your intention with my mom? I'm 14, 15, 16 years old. And I'm the guy, I'm making my lunch before school now. I'm doing all my laundry. I was an athlete. So every day I had to do laundry. And I'm looking out for my little brother and sister. And so I was glad when my parents got divorced, because my dad, prior to the divorce, was a angry, a man who really pushed me very, very hard. And when the divorce came, it broke him and it changed him. So he was forever changed after the divorce in a good way. But from my perspective, I was so glad when my mom when they sat us down and gave us the speech. I remember saying, good, I'm glad, about time. I was glad, but it was devastating to have no father in the house. I had my grandfather, teaching me how to shave and, those basic things that a dad should teach his son. My dad was a great dad and is a great dad, but he wasn't in the home to do it. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. Yeah. Wow. So, my mom and stepdad got divorced. They were married when I was 4, got divorced when I was 10. And I remember, because their fights, man, were so bad. And my dad,
man. Yeah.
And if you've been through that, like I vividly remember being on the phone with my mom, and first of all, I remember when he moved out, and I remember my mom telling me he's not going to come back. And then I remember being on the phone with her months afterwards, telling me that their divorce was final. And I remember asking her, well, who am I going to live with? And she told me it was going to be her. But there was this sense of loss a little bit, because like I had lost the one dad that I knew. And at the time, like you only know what you know. And my stepdad was very intense. He drank a lot. He yelled a lot. He had a heavy hand. At the same time, I felt that loss. I'm like, man, like you only know what you know. And that's the father I know. But at the same time, there was a part of me that was relieved, because I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to see him fighting anymore. This seems like maybe a new adventure to be had, I guess. Like that was kind of my mindset with it. But it was also, I looking back on it, I felt kind of guilty feeling that way. Like almost like, should I be somewhat relieved, or is that wrong? Where does that land for you?
Well, I just remember thinking, okay, in this story, My dad is the villain and my mom is the good guy. So because of the things that happened to lead up to the marriage or the divorce, it was easy to vilify my dad. And so I did that. You know, he was the guy now who was kind of, you caused all this. My brother and sister were younger. They had no idea. So just trying to navigate that, you know, there was probably some bitterness early on. And then when I saw the brokenness in my dad over years, that's changed. My dad was the best man in my wedding. So that changed a lot. And, you know, here's the deal. We can't go through life. And this is part of the problem, I think, with a lot of guys. We can't go through life blaming others for our train wreck. You know, at some point, there's a story of Abraham Lincoln when he was elected president. He was selecting his cabinet members, and one name kept coming up, and Lincoln kept rejecting that name. Finally, they said, listen, this is the most quality guy for the job. Why do you keep rejecting him? And Lincoln said, I don't like his face. Now, you need to realize Abraham Lincoln is known as the ugliest man to ever hold political office. He's known as that guy, the ugliest president ever to hold a political office in our country. But he's saying, I don't like his face. And they said, Mr. President, he can't help the face that God gave him. And Abraham Lincoln said something very wise. He said, after 40, every man is responsible for their face. And so what he's saying is at some point, we've got to say, hey, I've got to let go of this thing. I've got to walk in forgiveness. I've got to let go of resentment. I've got to let go of bitterness. And I've got to embrace that, because if I have people in my life, like a father or a stepfather or a bully who hurt me and I'm unwilling to let them go, I'm dragging them around. So I've got this chain locked onto my ankle and I'm dragging them around. And I think it was Leonard Smeads once said, to forgive is to set a captive free, only to realize the captive is you. And so that person who you're in bondage to, they probably don't know, they probably don't care, they might even be dead, but you're dragging them around and they're slowing you down. I mean, you've lost a lot of weight, you're in great shape. You know how free you are to move compared to when you were heavier, when you were younger? There's a freedom, and that's what forgiveness does. It brings a freedom to a man to move and to act and to become his best version. And he needs to work through that bitterness and resentment and get to the other end of forgiveness.
That makes a lot of sense. I heard a quote, and it's been a quote that's been, quoted over and over again, but not forgiving someone or holding a grudge is like drinking poison, hoping the other person will die.
Yeah.
It's so true. Sometimes the other person was like, oh, wow, you were mad at me? I had no idea. Like,
exactly.
Kind of sucks to be you, doesn't it? Meaning the person carrying it. Okay. Yep. So, definitely have a good understanding of where you came from. Now let's transition to, I know you're recently putting out some content of 7 lessons that your wife would have given you when you were 26 years old. So let's fast forward, obviously through high school and college and all that good stuff. And let's get to marriage. So you've been married for how long?
30 years this August.
Okay. August what?
August 1st.
Okay, man. We're like a week apart. I'm August 9th.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, I told my wife, listen, I'm not going to marry you during football season because I was a football coach. And I'm not going to marry you during hunting season because hunting season where I lived was the second Saturday in August. So she graciously said, okay, let's do August 1st.
Dang, man. All right. So is that lessons 1 through 8 or something? Like, hey, no, I'm kidding. All right. So what was going on early in your marriage that you wish your wife would have advised you on? Well,
so what I thought, now realize from a Christian standpoint, I did not have sex with my wife for the entire, we were married less than a year after we started dating. We did not have sex. We had some issues with that stuff, but we never went there. I just thought, man, okay, so marriage is cool. This is kind of all about me. I've got a wife who's going to make love to me whenever I want. And she does, but back then she wouldn't. And then I wanted a woman I'm like, she's going to cook for me. She's going to clean the house. I had this idea of what it would be like. And man, we got back from our honeymoon and I learned my wife didn't know how to cook. In fact, I was a professional cook at the time. Wasn't a professional. I cooked in a restaurant, but she's like, you're the cook. So I'm like the cook guy. So I'm like, well, okay. I go into the bedroom to take a nap. She goes, hey, you can't use those pillows. You can't use that duvet cover, whatever that is. You got to use your crappy college pillow because those are decorative. I'm like, what? Went to go take a shower. Don't use the towels hanging that we got for our wedding. Those are decorative. Use your college towel. Everything I thought about marriage exploded within the first 2 weeks. And I realized that I married an angel and I woke up with Satan. I mean, it was like, and it wasn't till about 2 years later. It was so bad, Larry. I actually remember, and I realized I was a high school football coach. I was a pastor, but I remember praying to God and saying, God, you just got to take her out. I can't divorce her, but I need her dead.
Just got to get rid of her.
You got to get rid of her. Take her out. I mean, I prayed some heinous prayers in there. I'm ashamed of my prayers. I'm ashamed. But I was a guy. My wife married a boy. She married a child who thought it was all about him. And it wasn't until 1995 when I realized I was about 28 years. I was 30 years old at the time, where I realized I'm going to outlove and outserve my wife and see what happens. I'm going to swing the pendulum the other way. Instead of making my marriage about me, I'm going to make it about her. I'm going to serve her and love her in spite of her. And it completely transformed my marriage.
How so?
Because what happened was I didn't realize this, but I don't know if you've had Gary Chapman on your show before, but he wrote a book called The 5 Love Languages. Yeah. So her love language is acts of service. So every time I made her coffee in the morning, which was every morning of the week, or every time I cleaned the house before she came home from work, or every time I did any kind of service for her, that was me expressing my love to her in her love language world. And it completely altered our marriage and shifted it for the better. And really, it was the impetus that led us to a phenomenal marriage. We have a phenomenal marriage today. And it all started back then. And I also think that day was the day I went from being a male to being a man.
I like that, man.
Yeah.
The other thing too, I want to make sure the audience really heard this, is that how you were going to go about your marriage was a choice and not a feeling.
Yeah. So I think that whiners want to feel good before they do it, but winners do it first and feel good about it later. And so I wrote a book, it just came out, Guts and Manhood. And in that book, it's the 4 irrefutable attributes of courage. And the first one is courage in the Bible is a choice. Every time it's a choice. And I think love is the same way. Love is a choice. Now feelings may accompany the right choice, but feelings can't be our motivator to make the choice. Love is way bigger than my feelings. The problem is we're taught by the Hollywood and all these things. We're taught that love is a feeling, right? I fall in and I fall out of love. And I think that love is something that you rise into one choice at a time.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, gosh, we could spend the entire podcast talking about this, right? But I want to talk a little bit about, it sounds like you were willing to serve despite, the expectation of you getting served. Is that accurate? Yeah,
I was taking a massive risk. I'm like, I'm going all in. And if she doesn't, I'm going to be basically a butler. Right. I'm going all in and I'm going to take a chance here because I've got nothing. I've got no other play. My playbook had run dry. I had no clue of what to do next. I'm just going to go all in. I read a verse in the Bible that said, that we are to love our wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And I thought, I believe that stuff, man. So I said, I'm going all in on this marriage. I'm going to love my wife and I'm going to die for my wife. And I hope she does the same. Otherwise I've got, 70 years of hell. It's going to be hard for me. It'll be great for her. It'll be hard for me.
Do you think that's one of the biggest problems that not just men, but just couples face in general, that where it's a quid pro quo or it's a tit for tat, like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and do these things with the expectation that you're going to reciprocate. And if you don't, even if you don't know my expectations, because maybe I'll keep them to myself. And if you don't reciprocate, I'm going to pout. I'm going to hold back. I'm going to be resentful towards you, all these things. I'm going to hold a grudge. Do you think that's one of the biggest problems?
Yeah. And this is a problem that people do not understand inside and sometimes outside the church. I don't think it matters. They live with a reciprocation expectation. We're basically ledger people, right? I'll do for you, you do for me. It's an unwritten rule. And that is a massive problem in a relationship, because you're under a covenant to go all in that relationship. And it, you know, a marriage is a legal contract, right? You go to the county clerk, you get your contract, but it's a covenant. So a contract is a firewall in business. It protects me from you. It protects me from litigation. A covenant is really where the rubber meets the road. It says, I am all in. I am going to go completely 100% all in for you. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be transparent, because this is the covenant I'm making. And if I'm going to leave myself open for you to hurt me, where a contract is a firewall. And so that covenant, though, is very difficult because there's a death involved. And the death is you're dying to yourself and your needs and your desires. There's a death that has to happen.
I agree with that. And I wish I would, kind of like you, I wish I would have known that information. Like, I think your wife and my wife could get together and they could probably make a list of 14 things, you know, like 7 for you, 7 for me. It'd actually more be like 27 for me, maybe 7 for you. Like it might just work out that way. But very cool, man. Let me ask you this. When you decided to go all in, you're like, you know what? I know her love language. It's acts of service, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go all in with it. Were the results everything that you expected?
Oh, I didn't expect anything, Larry. I just realized my marriage was a mess, and I had played every card I had, and I was going to play this last card, and hopefully it'll fix my marriage. So I was just hoping my marriage would get healthy and I would stop hating my wife. And so looking back, Larry, it was almost an immediate response on her part. I did not know her love language was acts of service at the time. I just knew I needed to outlove and outserve her. And she immediately began to reciprocate without me even expecting that. It just started happening. And I was flabbergasted. It was a head scratcher. Why is my wife loving me back? Why is my wife loving me better? And I realized she was being loved, and I was feeling her spirit. And because of that, she was overflowing that back to me.
Mm-hmm. I love that, man. And it makes total sense. I mean, why wouldn't?
Yeah.
Okay. And let's move on to, how long were you guys married before? You have 3 sons, correct?
3 sons. Yep.
And your youngest is Colton.
Yep.
That's my youngest, Colton.
Oh, no way. That's awesome.
Yeah. We call him, well, so he's still kind of like, you know, he just turned 6. So he's kind of like that cute little peanut, you know, still. And he knows how to play that card. So like his big brothers call him Colty Colt. They call him Colty Colt.
That's funny.
That's what we call him. I'm sure it's not going to be much longer. He's going to stand for that. He's going to be like, Dad's Colton. You know, it's Colt, right?
Yeah.
C, right? So three young men. How long were you married when you had your first?
Wow, they came about 2 years apart. And so we were married and realized all of our kids, they were like birth control pill method, you know, with rhythm method and condom methods. All 3 of our kids, 3 different forms of birth control. Found out my wife was pregnant with Colton the day I was going in for a vasectomy. So none of our kids were planned, by us at least. And so, I was married when I was 28, and we had our first, I was 26. We had our first child, James, at 20. I was 28. Then Darby came at 30, and then Colton at 32. So just kind of boom, 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 boom. And we'd only been married, you know, a year and a half. So
very cool. And I want to ask you this, man, because I'm so curious. I'm a man of raising young men.
Yep.
I would actually just love to have more conversations with you, if I'm just being really honest, of what I can expect, you know, because my oldest is 16, or he'll actually be 16 tomorrow as we record.
Wow.
And so 16, 14, 8, and 6. And I'm always wanting to learn, how can I help shape and mold and raise these young men the best way? I don't want to be 60 years old and being like, oh man, I missed that lesson. Oh, I missed that one too. So I always think it's so important. I mean, you know, we obviously have our own mastermind, Dad Edge Alliance, and I'm always wanting to be in the room with men who are ahead of me because I don't want to miss out on those things. And so what has been the most impactful things? And I know you're probably going to answer this a lot in line with your faith, but what have been some of the most impactful lessons of raising young men for you?
Well, can I share one failure and one success? Okay.
Absolutely.
So the success with my sons is my sons now, what I did when my kids were little and in the home, I'm reaping the rewards today. I've got 3 adult sons that are saying, "Hey Dad, when can we come over and make duck sticks? We've got like 100 pounds of duck sticks we've got to make together. Hey Dad, are you going to go on the bear hunt with us? Hey Dad, hey, archery season's here. We're going to take a week, you and I, and go." So I've got kids now who are young men who are wanting to be engaged with their dad, because when they were little, I was engaged in their life. I mean, I'd come home and I think for a man, the success where I hit the ball out of the park, Larry, is I was great in the stress bubble, right? When the kids are in the home, I call that the stress bubble, or men in the arena. When we were in that stress bubble from 6 to 9 or 6 to 8, 5:30 to 8:30, I was on, throwing the kids in the air, loving the kids, chasing the kids. I was doing stuff with the kids and then investing with my wife afterwards. And then every morning we had breakfast together as a family. I made it. It was meat and eggs, some kind of meat and some kind of eggs. And we just did that together as a family the entire time the kids were in the house. And that is reaping rewards today. That's my success. My failure, and this is a catastrophic failure. My wife is now a mother of 3 sons and 1 husband and a ton of testosterone. I mean, we are athletes. We are, all 3 of my boys went to college. 2 of them played college football. I played college. There are a lot of testosterone and a lot of dirty clothes and crap laying everywhere. And the biggest failure I made, and Larry, I'm just telling you this, I am ashamed of this. I speak about this publicly. I didn't realize I had made this mistake until about 5 years ago. My kids were already out of the house. I did not frame my wife well with my sons. My wife was the mom who's going to be crazy if the house is not cleaned. So what I framed her in a way of, get the house cleaner, mom's going to go off. And so I framed her negatively with my kids. So my marriage was great, but the way I framed her with my sons was not right. And so I've had to go back to my sons and say, "Listen, I feel like I did a great job with you, but I did one thing wrong. And you've got a phenomenal mother, an amazing mother, and a strong mother, a warrior queen. And I did not frame her well with you. And I apologize for that." And so I've had to go back, because I don't want my sons to frame their wives in that way. Like my middle son's married now, and he frames his wife in such a beautiful light. I'm just so proud of him. And I've told him, "Darby, I'm so proud of how you frame Libby, because your dad failed you." And so that was an area I failed. And I'm committed to changing that. And I am changing that with my sons, but that was an area where I failed. I didn't do that with my friends. I never framed Shanna as a ball and chain or anything like that. But with my children, and probably with my dad, I framed her in a way that was not appropriate or right. And for that, I'm ashamed.
So very, very specifically, I want to talk about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Very, very specifically, because listen, man, 1 out of 7 of my core values is humor. There's 150 core values, right? And people operate within 5 to 7 of them.
Yep.
We talk about this a lot on the podcast, and usually the way core value, a lot of people, we talk about core values and we say that we live by them, but sometimes we have no clue what the heck they even are. And the way they usually show up is, I don't know what it is about this thing, but it doesn't feel right. Or I don't know what it is about this person or situation, but this feels really right. That's usually your core values that are speaking to you, right?
Yep, absolutely.
But one of mine is humor. And the reason I say humor is because you can't raise 3 sons you can't raise 4 boys me without operating within some humor and no kidding around. Like I've told this story a few times. Recently, I went to the bathroom in my house And I did use the toilet, by the way. I don't just pee in the corner like the dog. And I went to wash my hands, and there's a half-eaten peanut butter and jelly sandwich sitting on the sink. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, there's a part of me, right, that wants to get super annoyed with that. Like, how in the world does this even happen? And then I think about it. I'm like, if I run that through the core values of like, hey, I need to find humor in things, right? Especially things that might annoy me, because otherwise it's just going to drive me crazy. It's like, our response is our choice. So I'm like, you know what? If I were to backpedal this, and if I were to put a hidden camera in this bathroom and see what happened with this peanut butter and jelly sandwich, was it being eaten while they were using the bathroom? Did they set it down and then go? Did they wash their hands and forget to take it out? Like, what was the story here? Right. But let's take this a step further. I always caution men, when it comes to marriage, be really careful when it comes to deprecating humor with your spouse, or like joking, or like calling her, like, for instance, we had a guy in the Alliance. I'm sorry, not in the Alliance, our big Facebook group that we have like almost 20,000 guys in there. And he made a post saying, do you think it's wrong to refer to your wife as the wife, or is it better to use my wife? And I responded to that, and I was like, she's not the wife. She's your wife, right? And that's not to say that we have possession of her, but a lot of times the way we view, like, oh, the wife or the woman or the queen, those are not labels that are usually looked at in a good light. It's the opposite, right? So I'm always really cautious about, like, I don't pick on my wife. I don't nag my wife. I don't deprecate my wife, especially in front of the boys. And I know a lot of couples do that. And I always, like, especially I know for a lot of guys too, that when women joke with their man about not being able to do something right, or, oh my God, you never do things right, or you're doing it wrong, or whatever, it's like, it's very emasculating, and it hurts. Right. And I think a lot of people in marriages, we think some of the things we're saying or doing maybe is harmless. And I always caution guys, I'm like, man, be careful with that stuff. You just never know how it's landing. Right. So, but in your experience, I want to hear more about this.
Yeah. I think with, my boys, I think smack talking is the love language of men. Right. So, like, if, as you and I build a relationship, you can call me up and go, dang, you've gotten uglier than last time I saw you. I'm like, dude, you suck. We're like, oh, we're bros, And so the guys are like that, but women don't function like that. Women, that love language of women is not sarcasm. And so when you're raising the boys, as we're talking smack, you got to be very careful to always honor mom. She is your mother. I'm very, very close to my mom, very, very close to my mom. And so I've always believed, man, I'm going to honor my mother. That's so important. And so having to go back with the boys and say, you need to honor your mother, because how you treat her is going to be similar to how you treat your wife, and your future wife, when she watches you interact with your mother, she's going to make some decisions about that relationship. So it's very, very important to note that. And so our family, I'm Portuguese, I'm Italian, and we're loud and kind of, demonstrative. And our family is very loud and demonstrative. And we just really are always going back and forth. And so probably the flaw of our family is that smack talk, and that the boys haven't learned to override mom and just keep it a male thing. And so they're learning. But the problem now, at 30 years later, my wife can talk smack. Like, I was in Walmart a couple of years ago, and I forgot to bring my wedding ring. And I was with my wife. We were shopping. And so she went and did her thing. I said, hey, I'm going to go to the sporting goods section, sit, kind of look around. I walked in there, and these two Walmart employees are working in there. And these gals could have been linemen for the, Los Angeles, the Vegas Raiders. They're big girls. And, Walmart over here, the girls don't have a lot of teeth, and so I'm talking to them and hanging out and just, talking stuff. And I got to text my wife, hey, I'm ready to check out. So I said, hey, I gotta go. My wife just texted me, and they go, you're married? I said, yeah. They go, honey, don't ever come in Walmart without a wedding ring.
Oh my God, dude.
So whenever I'm looking good, I'm like, hey, honey, I'm looking really good today. You better be careful. And she goes, stay out of Walmart and Dollar General.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
So, yeah, she can talk some smack now, buddy. And so when she does that, I go, oh my gosh, I love you so much right now. I'm like dating a beautiful woman that talks like a man. I love this woman, but I'll tell you what, I'm not going to say that to her. I'm not going to tell her, hey, you're looking pretty ugly and fat today. I'm not going to do that because that's not her love language. But for me, I like to smack talk. I'm a guy. When a woman can learn to do that with her man, whoa, buddy, she has transcended something that's glorious.
Gosh, man, it's funny that you say that stuff because so my wife is very good about not nagging me, right?
Yeah.
But she's a lot like yours, where she'll mess with me, she'll joke with me, a lot like that. And I do, man, I love it. And you know, I don't know what your experience was raising 4 boys or 3 boys. My experience now that I have, especially my 14-year-old, the way he shows love is he punches me in the arm constantly, or he pushes me around. And the thing about it, so he and we work out together, and the kid he's 140 pounds, and you'll appreciate this. He's ferociously strong.
I've seen the pictures.
Yeah.
He looks good.
He does, like, physique wise, he looks good. Cause he and I mean, as this show launches, you know, we've already competed, but as we're recording this show, we're a month out from competing in this bodybuilding show together, which by the way was his idea, which by the way, I did try to talk him out of it a few times. Cause I do have a history of competing. I've done 12 shows. The last show I did was in 2011. And I was like, I'll never do this again because the diet is so hardcore. And, you know, anyway,
well, I'm just envisioning you in a Speedo, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's a scary sight, my friend. But and I don't mean in a good way. Actually, really funny story. Really, you'll appreciate this of boys. So I ordered our posing trunks, you know, actually the Speedos, AKA Speedos. I ordered these things. And so they came in the mail, open them up. And my 8-year-old looks at me like just absolutely like ashamed. Right. And he's like, Dad, what are those for? And I'm like, I just smiled and I go, what do you think they're for? He goes, you're not going to wear those to the pool, are you? Oh man, I was dying laughing. But anyway, so, you know, yeah, we ordered it's just, those are terrible. But anyway, going back to what I was talking about. So he's 140 pounds. He just got done a few months back with his last year of middle school football. He's been playing football since he was in 3rd grade. He was, he's an offensive lineman. Oh, and he's the lightest one by about 40 pounds, at least 40 pounds. One of the other guys on his line is 240 and this kid's 14.
Holy cow.
But I think the lightest, cause he was 130 when he was 180. And then some of these boys he was going up against were well over 200 pounds, but some way, like he's so strong that he somehow bulldozes people. I don't know how he does it. And so his love language, like I swear, man, it's definitely physical touch. But for me, like my wife, like I was joking with her, I was like, God bless. I was like, there isn't a moment where there isn't an opportunity where I walk past him and he doesn't like nudge me with his shoulder, punch me in the arm, and he laughs about it. And she's like, I think that's his way of showing you affection and getting your attention. I'm like, oh yeah, I know. But I also think it's interesting because I think for him, being a young man, and I'm like his old man, right? He's sort of testing his strength out. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you're shaking your head.
Oh, for sure he is.
I'm just going to let you talk. What's your view on that?
Well, what he's doing is he's wanting to know, and he's wanting you to tell him the one thing that every man wants to know from another man. Do I have what it takes?
Yeah.
And so he's positioning himself against you, not as an adversary, but as an ally. And he wants you to tell him, dude, you're such a stud. Here's the weird thing, Larry, there's a transition though. So you go from being this Superman that, you know, you're throwing your kids in the air. I used to throw my kids. Like we had like 10 different moves. So I'd throw them in the pool and people would watch. It was just awe-inspiring. The bazooka, we had all these cool moves, you know, but as my kids got older, I couldn't throw them anymore. And so they began to position like your son is doing. Do I have what it takes to be like you someday, Dad? And last summer, my middle son, Darby, who's a marathon guy, is so fit. He's a wilderness, hunter. The guy's he's just a stud. I said, hey, Darby, I'm going to try to climb the 3rd tallest mountain in Oregon in a day. It's 12 miles round trip, 12 and a half miles round trip, and 55 100 feet of gain. It's brutal. And the last mile is this straight up scree path with, volcanic crust rock. We call it scree. It was brutal. And he was so far ahead of me, Larry. I mean, he was so far, he would wait like 15 minutes. I'd get up there. I was hurting. I'm a big dude and I'm 56 years old. And I remember we had a rite of passage on the mountain. I remember sitting down going, man, this is brutal. I'm the oldest guy in the mountain and I'm the heaviest guy in the mountain. And my son said, well, Dad, that's your choice, and it was funny because we got down the mountain and he said, we summited the mountain and we got down. He said, Dad, I've never seen you suffer so much. It was awesome. And so my son was able to witness me suffering on the pathway to success, but a rite of passage happened that day where now he became the strong one and I became the older one. And that happens sometime, I think, in the 50s for men when their sons supersede them in strength. It's just the way it is in life. So what your son is doing now is he's going, do I have what it takes, Dad? Do I have what it takes? One day you're going to have to say, probably in the next 10 to 15 years, not only do you have what it takes, son, but I need you to carry my pack now. And that's a sad day for a man, but it's a day that we all experience.
Can I share a quick story with you?
Absolutely.
And then I want to ask you more questions that are more faith-based around the masculinity and the male role for us men, husbands, and fathers.
Absolutely.
How's that sound? Okay, cool.
Love it.
So I've gotten to know you a little bit. I didn't know that story about you summiting the mountain and this whole rite of passage. You and I are very similar. And what I mean by that is, so I took each one of my boys on a rite of passage hike up a 14er in Colorado, which was great. Right. And I had done it before. And then I was taking them and I took my 11-year-old Mason, he's Mason, my 14-year-old that I'm competing with. I took him 3 years ago. We hiked up Mount Quandary. It took all day. And what happened was he was only 11 at the time. And we're hiking up this mountain and we're getting to high elevation. He's getting tired. Long story short, I could tell he was getting tired and it was worrying me. And so each one of us had a Camelback on and a backpack and, full of food and snacks and water and that kind of thing. My pack probably weighed about, 25, 30 pounds. His probably weighed more like 8, right? Not too heavy, or 10, whatever it was. I could tell he's getting weary. And we're at that sweet spot of like, if we turn around now, it's just as much time, it's another 5 hours. So if we go up, it's another 7 at this point, right? So you're kind of at that sweet spot. So I told him, I was like, I can tell you're getting tired. Give me your backpack. Let me carry it for you. And he's like, no, just like typical guy, right? Doesn't want any help. We go another 15, 20 minutes. He's getting weary. I tell him to do it again. He tells me no. About another 30 minutes, I'm just like, okay, now I'm getting really worried about him. And I was just like, as your father, give me that backpack. That's an order, right? And he takes it off very reluctantly. And I didn't realize that I was being condescending at the time, but looking back on it, I was being condescending and I didn't realize it. And I put my arm, and I thought I was doing good. I put my arm around him and I was like, son, this is a rite of passage. We've learned several lessons already. You're going to learn more lessons when we get to the top. I'm going to be telling you about, but one lesson is to ask for help when you need it. And I said, and you're getting tired. It's okay to allow another man to help you. I was like, son, who knows? Maybe on this trip, I'll be asking you for your help. And I kind of laughed about it. And he's 11 years old at the time, maybe weighs 90 pounds. So we get up to the top. I read him this letter. We have a fantastic hour up there hanging out, get something to eat. We come back down. Well, upon summiting, like my very first few steps, we got probably another 6 hours to now get down. Yeah. My quads, both of my quads start to lock up. And like Noah, and I grew up with doing athletics and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel very good. Yeah. And I was like, I'll just ignore it, get down. So the further we got down, and we're only probably maybe a quarter mile down, and I'm like, this is not going to be good. And all of a sudden, my legs, both of them, locked up.
Oh, so been there.
Oh man. And so I'm like, oh, this is not good. And I'm trying not to like panic. Right. And I'm like, okay, let me stretch out. And he's like, are you okay? I'm like, yes, let me stretch out for a minute. I'm like hydrating, stretch out 10 minutes. We can start walking again. Another 20 minutes. They lock back up, this time worse. stretched out. They loosened up by another 30 minutes. Now they locked up to the point where I'm like, I don't know if I'll be able to get down this mountain. Luckily, we were with a group of guys that were with me. And one of the guys was like, dude, you need some sodium and potassium and a lot of water right now. So I downed a bunch of beef jerky, like 3 packages of it, fruit, Gatorade. I just drank the crap out of the stuff, stretched out. And I was like, I think I'm good. I think I'm all right. I'm looking all over for my backpack. And I'm like, where's my backpack? And I look over my 11-year-old, 90-pound son. He's got his Camelback on, my backpack, and his backpack all strapped to his back. We're talking probably a good, because I drank a lot of the water, but probably a good 20, 25 pounds, a quarter of his body weight.
Wow.
And I go, Mason, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm carrying your backpack. He's like, you know, I was like, no, you're not. He's like, yes, I am. I was like, no, you're not. Give me the backpack. And he pointed at my chest.
He quoted you.
He did. He pointed at my chest and he goes, you told me that it's okay to ask for help. And you told me that there might be a time on this particular hike where I'm going to have to carry your backpack. I'm doing that. This is going to make me a bit emotional. And then he just turned around and started walking. And one of the guys that was with me, and this is where like-minded, objective men who have your best interest are amazing to have in your corner.
Yep.
So I went to walk after him and he went like this, just grabbed my shirt and said, don't you dare. And I was like, what? He goes, do not take that backpack from him. Do not take this moment from him. You let him carry that as long as he possibly wants to or can until it's safe, until it's not safe anymore. Do you understand? And I'm like, yep. And dude, that took so much. Like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the safe thing? Like my ego was telling me, go get that backpack off your son. Like, what kind of man are you? And what we realized on that trip, man, is exactly what you did. My son got to see me in this crazy vulnerable moment where I was struggling. And the biggest thing he remembers of that rite of passage was, I got to help you. I got to carry your bag. And that was freaking amazing, man. And I think it's amazing that I've never met one man on the face of this earth who shares a similar story and a hike and a journey with his son. Super cool.
What happened there, man, was you told him on the way up, you don't have what it takes. And he redeemed the situation on the way down. And so he would need from you the affirmation, which I'm sure you gave him, which is, son, I'm so proud of you that you were able to carry the load. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing. When I was, when my boys were younger, when I was in my 30s, I had a Alaskan frame pack, which is the external frame, and it had a meat shelf on it that folded down. And my boys would stand on that frame and I would hike them for 4 or 5. I'd hike the heck out of the mountains with them standing on this frame, and I'd hike them. And then as I got older, we hiked together. And as I get older, now they start to carry the load. And there's a rite of passage that's hard for us men, because I would like to say, you know, I can carry the load all my life. You know, I'm doing a 65,000 push-up challenge this year. Last year, I bench pressed 225 20 times. I'm in one set. I try to challenge myself physically, but I realize that I'm losing 1% of my oxygen capacity every year now. It's just going as we get older. And so my kids are in that position, this glorious position that if we've done it right, they want to help carry our load. It's really beautiful. It's tragic if you're the old guy, but it's beautiful if you've done it right with your sons and they're wanting to now carry your load. Because I know some fathers who they get the heavy load and they can't handle. Their kids go, screw you. You never helped me when I was younger. You weren't around when I was younger. But guys like you who have done it right, you've got children who will grow up to be men who are looking for opportunities to help you carry your load. And that's really a beautiful thing, man. Well done.
Hey, back at you. Back at you.
Yeah.
I really want to talk about masculinity. And I really want to talk about men who are faith-based with masculinity. You've got a lot of resources out there. You've done a lot of study and writing and speaking on this topic. But talk to me about masculinity and faith and being a husband and a father.
Yeah. So I call it my man theology or my masculine theology. My book, Strong Men, Dangerous Times, really is about defining what a man is. And I have in fact, the book is designed as a mountain climb. So the first section is called the trailhead. Second section is the climb. Then you have the summit. Then you have the descent. Then you have the trail's end. And my man theology is very simple. And I think I've been intrigued after 30 years of full-time ministry at how the church does not attract men and how they strategically, most churches neglect men. And I'm a little bit disturbed because I believe that when you look in the Bible and you look at real life and you watch the news, it's very clear that when a man gets it, everyone wins. When there's a tragedy, it's the men that come to the rescue. When there's a war, it's the men who die. It's always men just want to have this hill to die on. Men want to die for something bigger than themselves. And one of the things that I believe that when God made man, he made men on purpose, and he made men for a purpose. And this makes sense logically, Larry. I mean, any of your listeners listen to this show, they're going to go, oh yeah, I never thought of it that way. So if God made a man, and if God knows everything about that man, and if God truly loves that man, what creator doesn't love what he's created, right? If he truly loves that man and he created that man, it makes sense that he has a mission for that man. He has a mission for that man. And if he's done all of these things, the next logical question would be, how can a man ever reach the summit of who he's called to be, the apex of how God wired him? How can a man ever become that man without radical devotion to the God who made him? And that's my theology. I think it's really simple. We don't have to sing a bunch of songs. We don't have to do anything weird. We just have to realize, if I want to step into my full version, my best version, I need to radically commit my life to the one who made me for that version. And it's that pursuit. There's a word in the Bible. There's 2 times in the Bible where the Apostle Paul, I don't know what your people know about the Bible, but the Apostle Paul's talking and he says, forgetting what is behind me. Imagine the mountain climb. Imagine you and your son. Forgetting what is behind me, I press on for the prize. Well, that word in the Greek is the Greek word dioko, and it's a Greek word. It's a hunting word. It's also a track and field word. It means to pursue or chase after. And so what Paul is saying is, he's saying, listen, there are a lot of trophies in this world that we can pursue. I'm a hunter. I mean, I've got a deer on my wall. I've got a deer here, a deer there. I've got mounted animals all over in this office. But the ultimate trophy is pursuing the God who made you. And when a guy can wrap his mind around that, it is a game changer, I believe.
I agree, man. I want to talk about the importance of men being the spiritual leader in the home.
Yes.
And I heard a statistic. I'm going to get it wrong. So you please correct me. But I think if the mom goes to church and the kids go with her, the kids have I think it's like a 20 or 25% chance, right, of going to church?
17.
Okay, 17. But if the dad goes to church with the family, the chances of those kids in their adult life going to church is like 80 or 90, right?
93%, according to Baptist Press survey. Yeah.
Yeah. So see, I knew you'd know those statistics. So, but I think that, and you're right. I mean, this is not to take away from, having a spiritual faith-based mom in the family.
No way.
But I do think, like, I look back on my childhood and just the men that came in and out of my life, and none of them were faith-based. Now, my grandfather, on the other hand, here's the interesting thing. I've always heard the term best lessons are caught, not taught. Mm-hmm. My grandfather went to church every day. And on Sunday mornings, I always loved spending the night at my grandfather's house on Saturday nights when I was younger, because he'd wake me up early and go to church. It wasn't that part that I loved. It was the donuts that we got afterwards.
Yeah, totally.
But I got to see my grandfather would go to church every day. He'd go to church every Sunday, and you could tell he never was outspoken about his faith, but he would do it. And he would always lead us in prayer before dinners and meals. But very rarely did he talk about it. Now here's the thing that I've decided to take this obviously a big step forward, and I want you to pour into our audience and encourage them to do whatever you think is necessary to be a spiritual leader, because I've had to learn this in the past 2 years. And that is, if I am not talking about my faith and answering questions of my kids and their faith and leading my kids and being the one that's saying like, hey, I know none of us feel like going to church. It's raining outside, it's cold, or it's this or that. We got this or that going on, but you know what? Let's go. This is going to be good. Like, and we do it. But I think openly speaking about your faith in a discussion format. I'm taking my oldest right now, my 16-year-old, through an online Bible study called Operation Timothy. And I'm his Paul. I had to graduate the program. It took me 2 years. I was mentored by a Paul. I was a Timothy, and now I'm my son's Paul, and he's my Timothy.
That's awesome.
It's awesome. Great. But here's the thing. I don't even though he and I are going through this, and I'm 2 years into now having this renewed relationship with Christ and my faith, and feel very comfortable talking about it now. But I'm still, I still view myself as pretty darn green. You know, and I'm always looking for men like yourself. And I know that there's men in our audience who are like, hey man, like, where do I start? Or how do I level this up even more? Like, what is the next right thing for me to do to be the spiritual leader for my wife, for my kids? Like, how do I do that? What do you think?
Oh man. So I don't want to be a self-promoter here, but I've got this book right here.
Yeah.
Was an Amazon #1 bestseller, or it is an Amazon #1 bestseller. And in that book, I lay out those 5 things that make a man. And the summit in that book is pursuing God passionately. And I really lay that out for a guy. And I do want to say this, Larry, before we go any further. I don't want guys to get scared by the word church. Let's not even talk about church. I don't want to talk about church. You said I have a renewed relationship with Christ. So that's what we're talking about here. We're having a relationship with your creator. Remember, Paul said, though I dioko, I press on. There's a verse in Jeremiah. It says in Jeremiah 29:13, it says, if you seek me with all your heart, I will let you find me. So God is not desperate for a man. God is not needy for a man. God makes a man. He creates him with a mission and says, listen, bro, I don't need you to fulfill my plan in this world, but I'm including you in my plan because I just think I love you and I created you. And so it starts with a man's desire to pursue his creator. And I believe that when a man truly, like you've done, so first of all, man, that's so awesome. The last 2 years, I'm excited for your journey. That really gets me fired up. But anyway, when a man decides to pursue God, we're fixers, we're problem solvers. When a man decides that, he's going to figure out how to do it. So he really doesn't need me to tell him. He really can do it on his own. But what he does is he goes, okay, I need to get a book on that, or I need to go to a podcast on that, or whatever. And he pursues it that way. When it comes to the spiritual leader, here's what I would say. So the 4th section of this book is the descent, leading courageously. And so what people don't realize, and you explained this in your story, you got to the top, okay, but what happened was you burned so much of your potassium that when you're having to flex those quads on the downhill, you started locking up. And what people don't realize, especially men, is we're so into conquering, we forget about the downhill, because the downhill almost is more difficult on the body because of the contracting muscles. And so a man has to really lean into the mountain. If you lean back, you lose traction and you slip on the scree. If you lean forward, it's a 90-degree angle and it's scary, but that's where you gain your traction. And what I have found with men is they get into, cool groups like the Dad Edge, and they're growing like crazy, but then it doesn't transfer to their family. They kind of lean back and relax. And so here's what I tell men. And Larry, if I told you what I did with my kids when they were younger, it would probably be exhausting to you because you're fairly new in your journey. And I was a pastor. I was paid to do this stuff, right? I mean, the church, there's an expectation. So here's what I tell men. And I know this is going to sound completely underwhelming. I tell men this: do something, anything, just lead. So for a man, it may be, okay, I'm going to start praying for meals with my family. For a man, it may be, I'm going to find a cool book or a program. I'm going to take my son through that program. I've got a free book online for dads. It's 200 things they can tell their sons and daughters. Just finding something where they can actually engage and do something that says this spiritual component of my life is important. And I don't know what that something is for a guy, and I don't want to overwhelm a guy with the somethings that I did. I just want that guy to find that next thing that he can do to lead his family spiritually.
I honestly think, and I know you're saying you're not self-promoting, but I encourage men to find platforms like this, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I don't think, and even in the Alliance, I don't even know if this is really widely known. We actually have 3 call teams that are biblically based. And we do that on purpose. We want to give men, earthly resources, but we also want to give, most importantly, we want to give them spiritual resources. And to be honest, I know this from experience, and I didn't always view it this way. And I can now, even at 46 years old, I can view it this way. Mm-hmm. But I always thought, even before I did Operation Timothy, because I was invited to do Operation Timothy from my mentor, his name's Brian, who is my Paul. And he invited me, and he's like, I would like to teach you. I'd like for you to do this. And up until then, I thought to myself, if I don't know everything about my spirituality by now, I probably never will. Mm. Like I kind of that was my horrible fixed mindset on it. Like, and I'm also, nothing against Catholicism. I'm Catholic, but I think a stereotype that a lot of people have about Catholics, and I think some Catholics have about themselves, I'm not putting all Catholics in this box, is like, I was a box checker. I'm like, I tithe and I go to church. Boom, there, I did it. Right. And I'm like, and I also didn't know what my next right thing was. Mm-hmm. I wanted to have like this really great relationship with God, but I had no clue where to start. And every time I read the Bible, I'm like, what did I just read? I don't even know. Well, it didn't really hit me until my kids started asking questions. Like, Dad, like, why do we do First Communion? And I'm like, that's a good question. Like, well, Dad, what does confession mean? Dad, what's the gospel? Dad, who wrote the books of the gospel?
Yeah.
How do we apply gospel and how do we apply the scriptures to today? And I'm like, I don't know. It's almost like your kid comes to you when you get a flat tire, and your kid looks at you and be like, okay, Dad, change the tire. And you're like, I don't know how. Like, that's really, you don't feel very well armed. But I honestly think I encourage men to go find communities like yours, Jim, mm-hmm. because that's where I found my safe haven for me to be able to ask questions, for me to bring like, hey, I don't know about this stuff, man. Will you please help me understand it? Will you please teach me? And that was the most amazing safety net to just fall into and be like, okay, cool. I'm a student. I don't have to know the answers, but I'm going to find out. And that was a great opportunity to learn those things. And yeah, I mean, I think, what have you found when men who, let's just say they come and talk to you, or other people that you know, or people you've even have encounters with in life, where you're just like, dude, I don't know where to start. And then they start just having conversations. What have you seen happen?
Well, I believe, Larry, and I know you do too, I believe when a man gets it, everyone wins. So once that man starts asking the questions, he starts getting the help. Here's what I've learned. I call it the redneck circle, or the pissing circle. You get a bunch of guys in a circle, right? And it's this circle where everybody's kind of whipping out their wieners and trying to be whose is the biggest wiener, so they're all in the, you know what I'm talking about, right? You got these guys in this circle. They're probably wearing your, posing Speedos, and they're talking about my job, my wife, my kids. Everybody's bragging in the circle. But I'm going to tell you what is the beautiful thing about the circle. Everybody's so busy bragging. The assumption is nobody needs help. When one guy in that circle goes, hey man, I got a question about this. Can you help me with this? I've never had a man rejected, and I've never been rejected when I've asked for help, because a man wants to know, do I have what it takes? And when another man says, you have something I don't have, can you help me? They're always more than willing to help. And so I think that as long as there is breath in me, as long as I have a pulse I am on a journey to grow as a man. And the way I do that is I simply ask for help. I'm 56 and I'm always asking for help from guys who are older than me. I mean, I want to know, hey man, my sex life has changed in the last, 5 years, 6 years. What's it like at 80? I mean, I want to know these things, And so it's like the two old guys are sitting on a park bench, and they're old guys, no teeth, and this beautiful girl walks by, and the one guy goes, "Oh man, you know what I'd like to do to her?" And the other guy goes, "What?" And he goes, "What's that thing we used to do?"
Yeah.
And so
Oh
I want to tap into the resources of the older men or the more experienced men. I think that may be the greatest asset of a man who's seeking his best version, is that he finds the Dad Edge Alliance, and he finds men in the arena, and he pursues personal growth, because he realized that he has to continue to grow and change and edit his life along the way to become and to die out as his best version.
That's so cool. Man, I have so loved this conversation, man. I just want to acknowledge and appreciate you for a minute, man, because the world needs more men in the arena with Jim. They just do,
that, man.
No, they do. I think a lot of us need to, here's what I think. You tell me you think. I think how old are you?
56.
Okay. So you're only 10 years ahead of me. One thing that I've said on this podcast, though, a lot, is that the dads that raised you and I, right? I think that, and this is not a ding against dads that raised us. I think they did the best job they could with the resources they had at the time, which were minimal, which were hardly really any. And they were also raised by a generation of men that were they were providers, right? They put food on the table. They worked their tails off, right? And then our dads, I mean, it's been said many times, but probably one of the toughest generation of men, because they've seen, they've been through things like the Great Depression, they've been through world wars, they've been through all kinds of things. And, they were focused on like, hey, I need to make sure that my family survives. I need to make sure that I put food on the table and I do my job. But I think our generation, you and I, we're seeing a generation of dads now. I think the age range is probably 25 to 50, where men are really hungry. Like really hungry. Like, okay, I not only want to put food on the table, but I want to be in my kids' lives, both feet in the deep end of the pool. Like, let's go. Right. At the same time, when it comes to all this talk about masculinity, all this talk about like, be the man, man up, toxic masculinity, there's a lot of confusion out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there's a lot of chatter. And the way I want to wrap this show up is, for all the chatter that's out there, all the confusion that's out there, where do you think is the best place for a man to start?
Man, that's a great question. That's a great question. I think the guys listening to this show have already started. They've already started. Go to someone who has resources beyond yourself and get help. Our target audience is a 25 to 50-year-old guy raising family, just like your target audience, very similar target audience. And these guys, the millennials get a bad rap.
Yeah.
But realize that the busters have created the millennials. We're the ones that invented the helicopter mom and the bulldozer dad and the participation trophy. So we're to blame. And so I see this bad mouthing of millennials, and I go, hold on a second. First of all, the millennials are doing some really awesome things that we never did. And anything the millennials are doing that's wrong with them is because of us, just like anything that the buster generation is doing that's wrong is a boomer issue. And so we need to stop blaming the generation above us and stop blaming the generation below us, and just take ownership, because that man who's raising a family right now, he's going through the same struggles that his dad went through and his dad went through. That's a tough place to be. And we just need to find guys. So the first thing I would do, and the first thing I did when God called me to launch this ministry, what was the first thing I did? I go, I know nothing about men's ministry. So I drove 2.5 hours to Stu Weber, who is a Promise Keepers guy. He's written numerous books, phenomenal human. And I talked to him. Then I went to another guy named Bill Perkins, who's another famous author, and talked to him. And I think we need to go to people who are ahead of us to help us get ahead. So that's what I would do. I would just say, humble yourself and ask for help. Humble yourself and ask for help.
I think that's one of the hardest things for a man to do. And
yeah.
I got to tell you, the first time I heard those 3 words, ask for help, came from one of my original podcast interviews with Chris Sinog, who's one of the most, I guess, highly decorated, skilled Navy SEAL snipers that's ever walked the earth. And I thought to myself, because I asked him, I was like, well, how is it, why is it that Navy SEALs are so successful? And his answer was, yeah, we asked for help when we need it. I was like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, we asked for help. We're only successful because of our team. When I'm pinned down and I'm under gunfire, I'm not doing my team any good by being quiet. I need help, because guess what? If I don't make it out, I'm hurting the team. And I never thought of it that way. But you're right. If elite operators, successful operators like Navy SEALs, men of faith, hey, listen, if we're having faith-based conversations, Jesus had the apostles, and the apostles had each other, and they asked for help when they needed it. And, why can't we? I think a lot of it has to do with our ego.
Oh yeah. It's pride is the biggest enemy of a man.
Yeah.
Pride is the killer. It's the ultimate killer. It'll destroy men. Men have to, and not only ask for help, but a man has to at some point say, hey, listen, the backpack is too heavy. And I've got options here. I can hand you some stuff out of the pack. I can hand you the pack. You can help me climb up the hill. You can give me your trekking poles. You can strap me to your back and carry my fat butt up yourself. But I'm struggling right now, and I need you to know that. And that may be the greatest thing a guy can do in his life, is to say, hey, my wife and I, for example, so we struggled the first couple of years of marriage, and about at our 20-year mark, we were struggling a little bit. And so we went and got marriage counseling, and it changed our marriage, which is a phenomenal story. If I tell you that story offline, you're going to laugh your head off with how that played out. And then 10 years later, we decided we're going to get counseling every 10 years. So our 30-year anniversary is coming up. We went and got 4 sessions of marriage counseling. Do we need it? No. But you know what? We want to become the best version of Jim and Shanna as we can be. And we realize we need to have counsel so that somebody can, I've got 3 helmets behind me. And in football, there's a thing I used to say, talk about getting snot bubbled. And there's just a little teeny micro angle off the side of the helmet that if you don't have your head on a swivel, you can't see the guy coming, and he'll snot bubble you because he hits you from the blind side. And so we need people in our life to see those blind spots in our life. And so we just need to seek people who can help us.
I agree, man. And I got to admit, before doing this work, I hated the idea of like, well, no, I'm a lone wolf. I can do all this myself. Like, and if I need other people like that, then I'm kind of weak, right? Nothing is further from the truth. Isolation. Absolutely. Yeah, man. Isolation is the enemy of excellence. And we got to keep that in mind. Dude, I have really, really enjoyed this. I want to make sure that the audience can find everything that you're doing in the world, because you're doing a lot of good, man. You got a lot of good books, your podcast, community. Where can guys connect with Jim?
Yeah, honestly, if they just type in Men in the Arena, everything that we post on social media is through Men in the Arena, not through Jim. We've tried to create a ministry that's not about me, but about the men in the arena. They're really our hero. So if they type in Men in the Arena, they can find us on Facebook, Instagram. We have a community as well, our website, whatever. So our podcast as well. It's all Men in the Arena.
Very cool, man. Well, guys, hey, not to worry. We're going to have all the links in the show notes. Listen, your next right thing is build a band of brothers. Like, don't do this stuff alone, and don't try to guess at it. If Jim's message really resonated with you today, you guys know where to find him, and I'm going to make it really easy for you. For all of our resources and for everything that we talked about today, and even if you want to connect with Jim, head on over to thedadedge.com/370. Again, thedadedge.com/370. Jim, this was awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Sure. Appreciate the opportunity, Larry. It's fun to partner with you, man.
Back at you, my friend. Gentlemen, go out, live legendary. Take care.